it should shock absolutely no one that the BBC wants open borders. And as we know, with Ofcom legislation being weaponized in a partisan way, they get absolutely no chastising for having zero right-wing representation on some of their flagship shows. Now, I say their flagship shows. Nobody's really watching or listening, let's be fair. This is on BBC Radio 4, which used to be one of the biggest news broadcasting shows in the country. And they've lost 1.2 million listeners in just 12 months.
Oh, this is what you get when you try to modernize.
Yes. Now, this was last year. This was 2023, and Radio 4 posted its lowest listening figures in 16 years, shedding 1.2 million listeners in 12 months, with the flagship Today programme getting what are thought to be its worst figures since 1999, just after something happened. An industry source suggested Radio 4's attempts to modernise may be turning off its core audience, with shows such as Today perceived to be airing, quote, woke content. Radio 2, which has been hit by controversy over the departures of a string of older presenters, lost 121,000 listeners. The results come from Rajar, typical UK body. The UK's radio audience management body. Its figures show that Radio 4 lost more than 11% of its audience in the year, falling from 10.6 million in the first quarter to 9.4 million in the same period. So precipitous declines in the listenership. And also we know lots of people are also cancelling their licence fee because for those abroad in Freedom Land, we actually have to pay a television licence in order to have a TV set which subsidises the state broadcaster, which is the BBC, which hates us. Not fun.
Hi folks, sorry to interrupt the video, but I just want to direct your attention to the aesthetics range of merch that we have on the store. These are beautiful images that I think work really well as posters or mugs. So if you want to support us, going over to the merch store at shop.lotus.com is easily the best way other than signing up on the website.
So one regular show on Radio 4 I thought we'd focus in on is Moral Maze. Have any of you gents listened to this before?
No. I've listened to some of their episodes from the 90s, which were quite good, and I think we're going to get into the decline.
What was, do you know any of their hosts in the...
I don't remember what the hosts were called, but I know like people like Starkey and Roger Scruton were regular fixtures there. When it was slightly more heterodox, slightly more interesting. There'd be more contentious debate on interesting issues rather than a kind of festival for the uniparty.
Yeah, well, that's quite interesting. How the BBC ossifies the boundaries of the Overton window are displayed in who they invite on. As you said, Starkey and Scruton being invited on, they wouldn't be invited on today because let's have a look at the regular panelists. Okay, so we have Andrew Doyle, who's
good lad,
pleasant lad, but he's a gay liberal, so he doesn't not representative of the right. He's the
he wouldn't call himself
far from the left. Yeah,
he would call himself a sort of traditional centre left.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So, but that's who they would put on the right wing box.
And that's who they put on the right, and even then, it's probably becoming a bit dicey for him.
Yes. Well, quite, and I think he I don't mean to disparage him personally, but I think he's one of those. There's a certain species of person. I think Konstantin Kisin is another one who kind of are in love with the cult of the independent thinker. They think of themselves as an independent thinker outside of the tribe, and as such, there's a certain allergy to the idea of being part of the right in any way. You kind of want to stand in between the two sides as they squabble rather than pick one.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like Andrew's show is actually very important on GB News because he has like former Tavistock whistleblowers on, and he's had my friends on before. But if we're talking about right-wing representation, he himself would not define himself as right-wing. Therefore, we're left high and dry. Giles Fraser. Anyone familiar with this fellow? I'll just hover over his name for anyone who doesn't know. So Giles Fraser is a divorced Anglican priest. He was voted Stonewall's Hero of the Year in 2012, and he's president of the Inclusive Church, which has pushed in synods to, quote, increase the number of people on general synod, both lay and clergy, who would have taken an inclusive line against discrimination on areas of gender, race, and sexual orientation.
So he represents the Conservative Party.
Quite, yeah. Christian skin suitor, literally everything wrong with the Anglican Church. I would say that as a Catholic, wouldn't I? Nesreen Malik, you're familiar with her, aren't you? Guardian communist and typical race baiter. Anne McElvoy, who's an economist journalist, and she's a neolib, but of course she's put in the right-wing category.
The Economist is basically a communist rag at this point anyway.
On the major issue, on the issues that matter.
Yeah, I'm not even joking.
Yeah, their Ukraine posting is delusionally neocon, I suppose.
The Economist is constantly putting out communist apologetics, why Karl Marx was right, and all this sort of thing. And it's just like, okay.
Oh, they recently put out a study, I'm going to cover this on a show on Wednesday, that says, according to the World Economic Forum, it's going to take how many years to achieve gender parity? And so we looked at 134 countries, and we found that there is still a contingent of women who don't go back to work. How do we fix this? So they're deliberately trying to eradicate stay-at-home motherhood.
Yeah.
Ignore what's best for the kid. Melanie Phillips, also someone they put on the right. So she's a prominent Jewish journalist who is very skeptical of Islam. Fair enough. She's one for our box, I suppose. Ash Sarkar, literal communist.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think the BBC is going to invite Mark Collett on anytime soon. So why does another genocidal ideology get representation? But
she is the left-wing antonym of Mark Collett as well.
Yeah.
Antonym of whom, sorry? Who is
Mark
this?
Collett, the
the
Who is this
guy who
person?
headed up Patriotic Alternative, who said
Oh,
if you
okay.
could save one book from a fire, it would be Mein Kampf.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Cringe.
people like Ash Sarkar are much more like actually in favor of legalized ethnic cleansing than anyone in patriotic alternative. I mean, if you interpret diversity and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion as it should be interpreted, namely as sort of a committed campaign to making sure that every possible institution across the country is less white, because no one's interested in diversifying the Council of Tower Hamlets. No one's interested in getting pasty lads from Northumbria into rap music. Clearly, when you actually interrogate this ideological commitment, it is a commitment to making the country less white, and it does amount to legalized ethnic cleansing. And Ash Sarkar is on record as cheering that, while also saying it's not happening.
Yeah, we're winning, lads, as I remember her saying.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Mona Siddiqui, who's Professor of Islamic and Interreligious Studies at University of Edinburgh, and then Tim Stanley, who's a Catholic journalist for The Spectator and Telegraph. Now, I liked him, but he is a Labour Brexiteer, and so he can be quite tepid on some things.
He's also very nice, which is not always a virtue.
As we'll see shortly. So I read out that list just to say there is zero right-wing representation in the show, basically.
I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, even the people they would count in the right are just liberals who are skeptical of Islam because they hate women and gays, which, hey, I don't really like Islam either, but doesn't mean we share the same trajectory of travel. So the reason I brought this up is because Moral Maze did this episode on immigration. Now, this was brought to my attention by Louise Perry, who said that she was listening to our show and she just had to get us to talk about this. And the reason we have to is because this episode features Tim Stanley, Ash Sarkar, and Richard Tice. So they finally brought on someone who's meant to represent the right wing. And I'm going to upset you boys because there is zero political representation we have at the moment because Richard Tice almost exactly says diversity is our strength. So just to give you the tone and tenor of the BBC's immigration debate, we'll play the panel's summary positions, and this is opened by
Just as a quick thing before we start, I want to like reform.
Yes.
I want to. But everything they do just makes me infuriated.
Appointing Simon Danzuk, the Rochdale candidate, after he was chucked out of the Labour Party for dubious texts.
I mean, literal groomer gets to represent Rochdale. No.
So Tice excommunicated another candidate who put up a boomer meme on his Facebook page of brushing a liquidated pride flag down a drain. And he said this was unacceptable.
That's exactly what we want. Anyway.
Yep, quite. So let's listen to the really staunch positions of the panel.
Limit, if any, should we put on those who want to come and live with us? That's our moral maze tonight. The panel, Ash Sarkar from the Novara Media Group, the Observer columnist Sonia Soda,
A moral maze.
the historian Tim Stanley, and the priest and polemicist Giles Fraser. Start with you, Giles. You take a traditional Christian view about this.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we welcome people who are vulnerable coming from other parts of the world, especially dangerous parts of the world. I also think that immigration more generally has enriched our country for centuries. I believe in immigration by consent, but I think it's something we ought to celebrate.
Sonia?
I agree with Giles that immigration is enriching, but I do think that sometimes those on my side of the debate have swept some of the moral questions it raises under the carpet. I'm thinking things like, are we using immigrants to avoid paying decent wages in sectors like social care? And are we just free riding on less affluent countries by recruiting their doctors and engineers rather than training our own?
Ash Sarkar.
I think there's a right to move and a right to stay. I don't want it to be the case that people have to, because of war, persecution, famine, poverty, or lack of opportunity, leave the places that they'd otherwise want to stay. But I also don't want it to be the case that people have to die where they were born if they want to live their lives elsewhere.
Tim Stanley?
My aunt was so angry about all the immigration to Britain that she moved to Spain. Personally, I would say I'm not just skeptical about immigration, I'm skeptical about migration, in or out, because I'll be honest, I'm uncomfortable with people moving around. I value attachment, loyalty, and home. I understand people might move out of necessity, but I don't think that's an inherently moral thing to do, and it can have some bad consequences for where they've come from and where they're going.
Panel.
Okay, so
one voice.
Yes. Now, that being said, at NatCon, when Jacob Rees-Mogg was being protested by the crazy communists they had to pull off stage, Tim did say we need to be more compassionate to asylum seekers as a Catholic. So he is quite soft on this generally.
Right.
Not great. And even the other woman, whose name I forget, who said about, well, aren't we just pinching the best and brightest from other countries? True, yes. Is that the standpoint that I want to...
Yeah, we shouldn't be leading with that point. Like that is that is at best 6th, 7th on the list of reasons to be against immigration.
It's subordinate to ethnic and cultural displacement because we've got nowhere else to go.
Yes.
frankly. That's it. We were never asked.
Well, also, I find it very interesting that Ash Sarkar says that she thinks that there is a sort of unlimited right to move and to remain. She said there's an unlimited right both to move wherever you want to go and to remain wherever you are. I wonder whether she would extend that right to the British in Kenya, whether she would extend that right to the French in Algeria.
Well, we know that she doesn't. She praised her great-great-aunt for being a terrorist against the British in India.
Yeah. I bet she's also.
They didn't have a right to.
I bet she's also radically against Jewish settlements in the West Bank. Why?
Yeah, I can only imagine her opinions.
So we don't want a single Jewish foot on sacred ethno-nationalistic Palestinian soil.
To stay and right to
Indeed, and quite. So this is a very insidious double standard which always counts against European countries.
But also the double standards confected whole cloth out of technologically contingent factors, because you can't have a right to move and remain if you don't have mass transit.
Yeah.
And so this right has just been confected out of nowhere. She acts as if these people have been teleported. Whereas before, as you pointed out, historically, migration only happened through colonizing armies.
Yes, quite.
And we've got comparable levels of that coming over through legal and illegal migration at the moment. But we're not allowed to draw that parallel. It's now just a right rather than an invasion. But all right, interesting. So the first guest they get on, because what they do is they bring on people to advance certain positions that the panel can interrogate. They bring on a Nigerian lesbian immigration lawyer who comes on to say that we should have no immigration restrictions because having immigration restrictions is causing mass immigration.
What?
Bear with me on it.
Well, did the people in the other countries view it as a challenge?
She conceives of the fact that people are only in England because they're trapped here. She describes
so
the
they're
country.
sort of marooned on the British Isles.
Yeah, we're like an internment
metric,
camp.
though?
Tom Hanks' Castaway.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's not like we lose a few 100,000 people every year.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does 600,000 a year manage to leave then?
But have you considered we also have 1.2 million incoming prisoners? Anyway, I'll just let her talk for us.
To pick you up on that, it seems to be that you are saying that having restrictions on immigration actually encourages greater numbers of immigrants. Is that what you're saying?
What I am saying is like that because people look at the restrictions, they want to come in before it is too hard for them to come in.
Right. Okay.
If people were...
Okay. So, so by that argument, we would then never place any more restrictions on because we don't want to encourage more people to try to come in sooner rather than later.
If we have a system that does not have such restrictions and people are allowed to travel when they want to travel, in and out of a place, people would come out and then they would go.
I'm sorry, so to nail you down here, you're essentially saying open borders, that people can come and go and stay if they wish and for however long they wish.
I'm not going to use that word open borders.
Okay.
Because the way that people understand open borders is quite different from what I'm trying to explain.
Okay.
So I'm not going to use that word.
But from what you have described, a lot of listeners will assume that if you do what you're describing, a hell of a lot of people will simply just come and probably stay.
Well, if you say so many people would come and probably stay, you need to look at why people are staying. One, the rules in the country allow people to stay because they can't go out. So people get trapped because they can't go. But if those rules were not there, those restrictions weren't there, people would go in and out. So you would not have so much number of people in the country as we are talking about.
I mean, to what extent, I suppose the right-wing response to this is a nation really isn't a nation if it becomes a place where people are just in permanent transit, where they just come and go. I mean, from that point of principle, do you see how it's difficult to sort of define what a country is if it just demographically is a giant ongoing churn?
A country will still have its identity and it will still be described as a country.
What is the guarantee of that? I'd like her to undergird that a little bit more strongly.
I just think that there may be people from foreign countries watching this, and I think it might be worth actually stating the point that the United Kingdom has no barrier to people leaving the United Kingdom. It isn't some kind of iron curtain, Soviet republic that prevents you from leaving. In fact, do you even have to show your passport to leave the country? You might have to get on the plane.
Depends if you're going by the Eurostar on plane.
Yeah,
you do.
but you know, assuming you have a passport, which of course everyone can get, you're allowed to leave. There's no barrier.
But as we know, there's a large amount of traffic just going across the English Channel.
There is also that.
There's not a lot going the other way.
Well, they're trapped, you see.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot. Diversity is such our strength that we have to turn the entire island into an open-air prison camp to farm it, which is what we're in a recession.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's much worth responding to in that.
No. She also then goes on to cite a Guardian opinion column that says that the British public are wising up to the benefits of migration, which is just the title of the column, but then she doesn't cite anything
in support of that
column. Yeah, I don't think she can rotate an apple in her mind. I'm going to be honest. Of course, this is the particular piece that she cited. Again,
where's the benefit then?
I'm sure all of those children in the Manchester Arena were really feeling.
No. Let's not talk about that. Okay, but let's talk about the economic growth. Where's that? Let's talk about the improvement to the services. Where's that? Let's talk about, I don't know, property prices or something like that.
Make it concrete.
Yeah, well, I mean, have you got a train to London recently? It's horrific. Like, where's the benefit to having just more and more people crammed onto our island, and for some reason us preventing them from leaving?
Well, Mr. Robert Ford says in this, the rising view is that immigration is a resource that can deliver gains for all. A majority now see immigration as an economically and culturally beneficial, as a driver of economic recovery, and as a vital source of public support for public services. The share of voters who say migration levels should stay the same or increase has never been higher, even as migration has hit record highs. Do you remember that map that said that only in London and one constituency in Bristol want to see immigration levels the same or raised?
So I need to represent my hometown. Brighton was also dementedly on board with the Bristol lot and the London lot.
Oh yeah, because I'm sure all of the immigrants agree with the lifestyle's been conducted in Brighton.
Quite, yes.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a certain composition that would be more in favour of chain migration that happened to live in London.
Well, also, it's just a strange thing. I mean, who in a million years would, if you were going to try and gauge the effects of Han Chinese immigration into Tibet, and you wanted to get an understanding of whether it had been good or not, would you ask the Han Chinese diaspora in Tibet, or would you ask the Tibetans?
It depends what kind of answer I wanted.
If you wanted to actively destroy the country, you'd ask the Han Chinese.
Exactly, and it's a peculiar thing. And we were mentioning the BBC earlier. I wrote a piece, an essay 3 months or so ago, 4 months or so ago, about Christianity and demographics. And in that piece, I found a news report in the BBC from the 1990s in which the BBC itself was talking about the way in which the Chinese Communist Party was using Han Chinese immigration into Tibet to try and destabilize Tibetan identity.
This has long been a concern.
Quite, and what I'm saying is that even at the BBC and at places like The Economist, who will likewise say that there are clear consequences to. I read The Economist regularly, and they will say things like, well, of course demographics matters in India, of course demographics matters in Tibet, but they don't extend that logic to the West. There seems to be this understanding that, Heathrow and Gatwick are together two sort of magic liberal cosmopolitan making portals.
Yes.
And as soon as people pass through those, they become upstanding citizens of a multicultural utopia, and it's clearly not true. They cleave to their ancestral identity, as I would if I was a Britishman, if I was an Englishman living in China. I would feel English. I wouldn't feel Chinese.
With the amount of rain we have, we just have magic soil.
Exactly. That's the thing.
Converts even the most ardent jihadian to a productive secular citizen.
This must be what they believe.
Yeah. Speaking of subversive
Just
foreigners.
a quick thing on that though. As someone who has lived in foreign countries, you become more aware of what you are in the process, in the contact with foreign cultures.
We had Mo, I'm going to butcher his name, but we had Mo Najmi on Deprogrammed recently. He was worth checking out on Twitter, and he said that he's from Pakistan, and he said that there are areas of this country which strike him as more sort of doggedly Pakistani than as Islamabad.
And it's totally true. When I was living on army camps and RAF camps, it's insanely British.
I'm more aware
you go to Gibraltar, and it is so. I've never seen so many Union flags.
Yeah,
and it's just it's proximity to Spain,
and you double down.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you recognize what you are much more because you have like a day-to-day contrast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The contrast is intensified in your own mind.
And it doesn't need to be demonized. This is another thing, and this is
it's normal.
It's totally normal. I think it's perfectly possible to make a humane case for demographic realism. You don't need to demonize another person's culture to say that it is not the same as ours. And in the interest of maintaining ours over time, and in the interest of maintaining all sorts of other things which we have long enjoyed as a sort of homogeneous, freedom-loving people, we would like to maintain our demographic balance.
If anything, it is actually disrespectful not to recognize the difference, because recognition is generally what most people want for themselves and for their own cultures.
Exactly.
If you refuse to recognize them, then that is essentially saying that you're not worthy of existence.
Friendship cannot exist between two peoples if there is no between.
Yeah.
If they're just one great amorphous, then there's no friendship.
Unfortunately, the parameters of arrogant liberalism, which seeks to liquidate all cultural differences and conflicts, don't agree with you, gentlemen. And here's one person who certainly doesn't, who is not a liberal, though. This is Sundar Katwala. This is someone that Harry's mentioned before, who is the head of the UK think tank British Future and former General Secretary of the Fabian Society. He's of Indian...
Wolves in sheep's clothing.
Quite. He's of Indian and Irish heritage. So,
right, could you just hover over the Fabian Society?
Yes, I can. There we go.
In fact, if we can get that, because they've obviously changed their logo, because their logo used to be literally a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not. Can you scroll down? Maybe it's on the.
Is this the one that was founded in the late 19th?
Oh, there
century?
it is.
There we go.
There you go.
There's the original coat of arms.
This is the one founded in the late 19th century. Right?
Yes, to produce socialism by increment in
Yeah.
Britain, because they realised a revolution wasn't going to happen here, and so they literally used the wolf in sheep's clothing as their own logo.
Well, these people are again invited onto the BBC, but none of us are. So just a little hint there. Katmala describes the debate, Tim Stanley as well. They both, before this little debate, agree that, quote, Enoch Powell was a racist, which he wasn't. He was actually a civic nationalist. That's the thing. Well, do you remember that Labour MP that you covered with Calvin a while ago that said that after the Rivers of Blood speech, I was harangued for my ethnicity, but I'm British? And they said, oh, what do you think? And he said, oh, yeah, I accept his identity. His nation is who he would fight for and play cricket for, which is a very incorporative way, actually, of putting it. But there you go. Cat Waller, with Stanley already having conceded that, they struggle to find a point where immigration will be unacceptable. And I just thought I'd play this little bit here.
Understand what is unethical about what Enoch Powell did, because it's always ethical to contest next year's immigration. You might want it high, low, or medium. It's never ethical to contest the immigration of 20 years ago. Enoch was saying send them all back from the last 20 years. So we all agreed after Brexit that we can change the free movement rules. We've got to be fair to all of the Europeans that came. So by all means, have a debate about what is a higher level and what is a lower level. There was a problem with what Boris Johnson did, because ethically, he's a have your cake and eat it kind of politician. He didn't agree with reducing immigration. He agreed with Brexit. He wanted control, and he agreed with more immigration. And while he was making immigration more liberal, he also said, by the way, the numbers will come down. And he knew it wouldn't.
Isn't that precisely why people feel betrayed?
Yeah, so that's
you said at the beginning we do have votes on things, like we had a vote on the EU. Okay, people voted to leave the EU and to control freedom of movement, but the problem is, for their point of view, immigration then went up. Whoever you vote for, the elite just does what it wants to do.
If Boris Johnson had been more honest about which cake he was going to eat, he could have taken people with him, because the immigration he increased, the students and the post-study immigration, the Hong Kongers to whom we had a historical responsibility, and the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainian case is fascinating because it's totally the opposite of the Powell argument. This was not the government foisting immigration on the people. It was individual people in
taking them into their
foisting
homes.
immigration on the government, because the number of Ukrainians we could take was dependent on the number of
critically, the public felt there was an element of choice and a personal agency. They were saying, I am letting someone into my home because I'm choosing to let them in. And the problem with the system at present is it feels as though they have no control over it. Politicians set the rule. It's all about what business wants, and they are actually being betrayed.
Let's learn that lesson. Let's have a humanitarian visa for Britain and let communities bid it up by offering
this is the issue. This is why I say you're being very...
Let's have a parliamentary debate like the budget, where we hear about last year, we hear about next year.
Forgive me, but I suspect that you basically want to encourage people to embrace immigration.
Well, actually, the current level, the 750,000 level, was a one-off because three massive things happened at once: Hong Kong immigration, post-pandemic immigration. When it gets down to 350,000, actually, we could sustain that, but we better build the houses.
According to the last census, something like 40% of people living in London were born abroad.
Yes. And
isn't that a remarkable change? And isn't it understandable that people are nervous about
the people who are born abroad and the children born here? Let's not be contesting the immigration of 50 years ago, 20 years ago, and 30 years ago. Let's have a debate about immigration where the migrant citizens, the settled migrants, the ethnic minorities, the white British born for 10 generations can all have a voice in handling it fairly for everybody.
Excuse me if I don't think he's being particularly honest there, because he's being very evasive, isn't he?
Sure.
Almost like the wolf in sheep's clothing argument.
Yeah, it's incredibly. It does sound like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
True to type, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise the point. Obviously, he said we need to build the houses. Just for anyone who still needs to hear this in the year of our Lord 2024, net migration actually pushes up house prices because it increases scarcity.
Yes.
Because we're only building about 200,000 houses, even though the government target is 300,000. And last year we had 672,000 people net coming in.
But notice his language. We can take 350,000 a year. Okay, maybe we could. Why would we want to? That's the question. And obviously contrasting unlimited Asian and African immigration with taking displaced housewives from Ukraine. Yeah, I'm quite actually willing to take women from Ukraine.
I've been to...
it's not dangerous.
It's not at all dangerous. I've been
maybe to some marriages.
Yes. I've been to...
but notice how when the women are in charge, no, we're not taking Ukrainian women.
I've been to refugee transition centers, in fact, in Hungary, and every single person there was a woman or a child or a pet, actually. There were lots of pets there as well. But the only old people there were... Sorry, I've just given it the game away. The only men who were there were incredibly old people. They were not young, able-bodied young men.
Yeah.
And so, refugees aren't difficult to spot when you see them.
Yeah.
So, hopefully, to bring on the right-wing opinion, I'll go through Richard Tyson clips really quickly. He decided to have a debate with said Reverend Giles. As a Christian, Harrison, this will enrage you.
Do you think it's important if people come to this country to live here from abroad that they subscribe to some of our sort of fundamental moral, ethical values?
Yes, I do. I think that's really important. I think that we've seen that multiculturalism has patently failed, whereas I think actually people who want to come and enjoy the privilege of living in the United Kingdom, I want them to actually say, yes, we all sign up to the single British culture, and then actually that's how people can work together, and that's how people see the benefits, particularly those...
Can I just get a question? Because I just wanted to yes there, because I've got a follow-up really. Do you think Christianity has played an important formative part in the formation of our British values?
I think without question. I mean, we're a nation that's based on Christianity. We've got the Christian ethos, and some of the things that people treasure about the United Kingdom all over the world are those great Christian values. And I think, therefore, and that's what British people who are born here or live here a long time, that's what we feel is
so far we agree. So part of Christianity is welcoming the stranger, welcoming those who come from, who are vulnerable, those who come from places that are, there's a lot in the Bible about refugees and how you treat refugees and how you welcome people. So that is also a part of our Christian heritage and formation.
Correct.
Yeah, very good. So you would think that there is a positive moral value for actually welcoming people who are vulnerable from abroad.
And this country has always been very generous in welcoming people from abroad. We've always done our bit. But I repeat the point that you've got two types of immigration, of course. You've got asylum seekers, and you've also got deliberately planned immigration over the long term. You take a country like Dubai, for example. They want huge immigration because they're building a city in the middle of a desert. But as I say, the thing is, it's got to work for both sides.
Well, what happens
if
it doesn't have to work for both sides? Why do you have to say it works for both sides? Why, if somebody...
Because that's...
Well, hang on a second, let me ask the question.
No, it's very important. Because it has to benefit...
I haven't answered the question yet. So the thing is, one of the sort of things, ethical things, is that actually sometimes you put yourself out for other people. That there are other people who are in need,
absolutely.
and you put themselves out for them, as we've done for all sorts of people.
But as was rightly said earlier on, it's about choice. And that's why people have been so welcoming and really gone, huge extra lengths to welcome people from Ukraine, for example. But it has to be about choice, as opposed to something that is forced on a community where they're not seeing the benefit.
I want immigration by consent, so we don't disagree with that. But I just want to hear you.
And that's the point.
No, I agree. But then why do you say net zero immigration? Because actually, I think the British people are a welcoming, tolerant lot, and we want to encourage.
Because unfortunately, at the moment, what's happened is, if you welcome 1.25 million people the size of Birmingham into a nation that's not growing at all, then everybody's getting a little bit poorer. The public services are a little bit worse off, and it goes on and on and on. And if you do that,
price worth paying.
I mean, Tice is right.
Price worth paying.
Oh, well, yeah.
He said that.
Just directly said there. Price worth paying.
That wasn't Tice that said that.
No, that was Giles singing.
Oh, right.
But I love this. Well, why do we have to give the British people consideration when it comes to imposing millions of immigrants on them? Because this is our country. Mm-hmm. We built it, we paid for it, and we're the ones who are supposed to be in charge of who comes into it.
And there's also the point as well that, I mean, obviously there is a Christian duty to welcome the stranger, but one of the operative words there, I would imagine, is stranger. You're recognizing that they're not a part of you, and to insisting on making them there's a difference between being welcoming to people who are in close proximity to you. So, for example, if there was a natural disaster in France, I'd probably feel a duty to welcome them into Britain temporarily for as long as needed to be the case. But that's different from saying that they can therefore become British overnight. Also, the same seems to apply.
I fall back on the verses from John and Matthew where Christ clears the temple of robbers. If people are coming into your space and actively defiling its purpose, then you can actually kick them out.
Indeed.
That's a very Christian principle. And I might suggest that Abdul is not a particularly vulnerable person. If he's holidaying over via the Channel dinghy, sponging off my money, and then deciding to leer at schoolgirls or blow up pop concerts.
I just want to be clear as well. I'm not a Christian, and if I had to choose, I'd be a lot more closer to paganism on this one. No, clear them out. Get out, you bloody sponges.
The Anglicans were the weak ones. There is a form of muscular Christianity.
But yeah, there is, and it can exist. But it's just that there is. I hate to admit it as a Christian myself, but there is a weakness in Christianity.
There absolutely is
for charity to descending into a kind of pathological altruism, and like Giles Fraser typifies that.
This is why I'm happy to be a lot more Nietzschean in this. Like, no, this is our country, not yours. Get out.
So I will just quickly finish in the last couple of minutes on Ash Sarkar. Ash Sarkar spoke to Richard Tice, and we heard there that Tice signed up to the fundamental British values, which never can really seem to be defined, at least in lieu of Christianity. And Ash decides to pick him up on this.
Oh, okay.
And Tice gives a very disappointing answer.
Oh dear.
So
I'm just interested in something you said in one of your earlier answers. You said that people who come here should sign up to a single British culture. What is that single British culture?
I suspect different people will say it differently.
Then it's not a single British culture, is it?
No, but actually, the culture of a nation, that's who we are. It's our heritage, it's our history, it's our values, where we've come from. Those who've grown up here, born here, lived here a long time. And one of the reasons we're most respected around the world is because of our sense of fairness, our sense of decency, our sense of compassion that we've touched on, and actually where we come from. And that sense of fair play and our role in the development of the world and what we've given the world, the incredible successes, the Industrial Revolution that helped billions more people live longer, happier, healthier lives throughout the world.
Hang on a second,
That's partly because of what we developed in this great country.
With the greatest of respect, you haven't answered my question. Lots of countries have fairness, lots of countries have compassion, lots of countries have had various industrial revolutions. You talked about a single British culture which exists today that immigrants should sign up to. Can you define that single British culture? The more specifically, the better, please.
Well, I can repeat exactly what I've just said.
Yeah, but that's not an answer.
That's probably not actually that constructive. I'll try again. There's a sense of fairness in the UK about who we are, and that's which is incredibly respected. Our legal system is one of the most admired because it's perceived to be fair. And I know it's a little bit quaint, and people take the mickey, but here's the thing. We invented the game of cricket, and the game of cricket is competitive. There's a bit of banter, but actually there's a real sense of, is it in the spirit of the rules? And there's something uniquely, I accept slightly quaintly British about that. You may or may not enjoy cricket, but it is part of who we are. That sense of fairness, that sense of decency, but also that sense of hard work. And based on, Hima, you've asked a question.
Anglo-Protestant culture,
based on
yes.
that Christian ethos of who we are, where we've come from.
Okay, I'm going back to single British culture. You've come up with fairness, which lots of countries have. You've come up with cricket.
And lots don't, for example. Lots don't share...
No, you haven't interrupted me. Richard, Richard, you just interrupted me.
Lots of people don't have the same views about how you treat women and how you treat other minorities.
Okay.
We are exceptional.
Let's get on to that. There are plenty of people in this country who have views on women, who have views on gay people, views on trans people that I passionately disagree with. I don't think that they should be booted out of the country, and I think they should have a right to live here. Isn't one of those British values that you talk about tolerance?
Yes,
Aren't
absolutely.
we tolerant of different kinds of people?
I think we are. I think we're a very tolerant. That's part of the British culture. That's why people, to reduce divisions or the risk of divisions, you've actually got to say to people, these are our core values. If you want to come and enjoy living here, sign up to those values, and then we can all embrace, progress, develop, and grow together. That's a fantastic thing.
But when you're trying to define, forgive me, this idea of a single British culture, come up with values which I think do exist in awfully large swathes of the world, and also
in many large swathes of the world, they don't respect women, they don't respect the minorities, and you've got to accept that. That's what we're really good at, and we should celebrate it.
So, are you saying that people that live in a society that we would consider to be coercive shouldn't have the experience and opportunity to live in one like ours, where there are those freedoms, there are those protections for minorities, there are more opportunities for women?
No, I'm not saying people shouldn't have that, but fundamentally, the role of government is to look after the citizens of the individual nation, and for immigration to work for everybody, so that it works for the immigrant and that it works for the existing citizens. Then you get the best of all worlds. But what I'm saying is, I believe the way for that the best chances of that is it's got to be in terms of the right quantity, so that people can be absorbed, integrated, and sign up to those values. Because if you go to a nation and you don't believe, for example, that women should be treated equally as men, then actually that's going to lead to division, and people are going to start to live in silos. And I think that's
We can't be too divisive. We must protect our women and precious gays.
So do we have to deport the TERFs? Because they think that women should be treated in a superior manner to men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a good framing, because we should actually be very paternalistic towards women because of the inbuilt physical difference.
Which is literally what the TERFs are arguing.
Yeah, I don't want to treat women and women equally.
They are different.
Yeah, we want to treat them proportionately. That's what justice is for, Richard.
I also think as well, though, and obviously Sarkar's line of questioning there is incredibly dishonest, but I do think she does, I hate to admit it, she does sort of have a point.
Oh, yeah.
And the point is this. Richard Tice, precisely because he still feels the need to operate within a certain politically correct progressive paradigm. We even use that word, progressive. That he's intent on defining what it means to be British purely in terms of the values you hold, purely in terms of ideas. And this is in my view the weakness in civic nationalism, is that because it defines belonging purely in terms of a set of synthetic propositions that you assent to. There's no reason why someone who's a complete foreigner can't equally assent to that and then become part of us. And it also leads to very intuitively troubling implications, where you would have to admit that a Nigerian, say, who holds to every single one of Richard Tice's preferred values, is, if one of those values is democracy, and if one of those values is tolerance, and if one of those values is diversity, that person would have to be more British than someone like Lord Bolingbroke from the 18th century, because he didn't believe in any of that.
Yeah.
And so when belonging isn't rooted in a sense of an ancestral connection to something, a shared history, a shared heritage, over which ideas can differ. Like you can be, there will be people who know about our history, people who would have sided with Cromwell in the Civil War. There might have been other people who would have sided, well, probably not Connor or me, or probably not any of us actually, but there would have been others who would have sided with King Charles. And so, like, you can't define but they were both a part of this country. It was a civil war, and so you can't define what it means to belong to a country purely in terms of values that people hold, because values are different. And what Ash Sarkar is doing is exposing that weakness in Richard Tice's civic nationalism, which is why we should ditch civic nationalism.
And the worst part about it is it gives Ash Sarkar a much stronger position to advocate from, because she is a communist.
Indeed.
She believes in the mass, undifferentiated, abstract, universal human. And that's what she's trying to bring about.
Right.
And that's what all of her questioning is leading towards.
Indeed.
And this is why she sounds so goddamn smug about it, because she knows she's on more firm ground than Richard Tice is, who's 1 foot in each camp.
Right.
If I may finish with 30 seconds, you said that Ash Sarkar might be lying in there. She says she is. She openly admits to lying, right? I'm not joking.
On the thing.
On this.
British about that. You may or may not enjoy cricket, but it is part of who we are. That sense of fairness, that sense of decency, but also that sense of hard work and
From listening to Aderonke, was that quite understandably she seemed very reluctant to give any credence to any argument that could undermine the primacy of the right to move. And I've got a great deal of sympathy for that. I too like to do contortions to defend the thing that I want to defend. And I think that one of the things that maybe we didn't quite get to is how important is that right to move.
Is that what you think?
We can talk about...
I like to do contortions to defend the thing I want to defend.
Yeah.
Literally admitting to manipulating the framing to manipulate you into agreeing with her.
Either that, or it is a rare moment of self-knowledge and realizing that she is as prone to the what's called confirmation bias as the rest of us. But it may well be that she is just openly admitting to being a sophist rather than a Socratic.
I'm going to side more with the sophist. But point being, the BBC wants open borders, the right have no representation, and Richard Tice is too soft to get my vote. So do something about it, reform, please.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Epoch series, this episode on Leonardo. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.